Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Would you ever go back to full body training 3 times a week for goals other than cutting as an advanced lifter? How would you program this? Well, we don't need to answer part 2 because the answer to part 1 is probably not. An advanced lifter can make pretty good progress if they've detrained for whatever reason, and maybe or can hold on to gains cutting on that sort of method, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But barring needing to do a quick linear progression on something like that, there's probably no need. I'm invested in a pretty serious home gym. I have all the equipment I need to do conjugate or any variation of the conjugate. So for someone like me, it doesn't make sense to do that. Right? It doesn't make sense to do that. And particularly when we look more and more at the data that's out there, and I've promoted a lot of full body, and I think most of you should be building a base on full body. Let's come back over to that. 90+% of people even following YouTube Fitness are still novice lifters. Okay, novice lifters do great on full body 3 days a week. They do phenomenal on it. I don't think there's anything better. But once you no longer need novice progression, I think upper lower 4 day works. I don't see a reason for me to vary from that at this point. You know, and I'm not even being dogmatic with that. I'm just looking at it works. It can be programmed any way you want. It'll hit your frequencies that are ideal for a non-novice lifter. You can manipulate volume, everything you need on it. It works fine. Works fine. So unless I only wanted to train 3 days a week, in which case full body might make sense, you know, I don't need to deviate from it. Now, could I space out even what I'm doing to a 3 day program? Sure. It would just take like a 10 day instead of a 7 day rotation. I could do that if I got older or something and was more concerned with recovery. Right, I could do that, but probably not. You know, I mean, I feel like I've milked for my life the best I'm going to get out of full body 3 day a week training. And I just don't see a need to go back to it, even for cutting. So even talking about goals other than cutting. No, I don't even think I need it for cutting. Why? I don't think it would be useful to me again at this point in my life. Doesn't mean novices shouldn't still use it. They should. And that's the point we need to remember with this stuff. Let's not confuse these things. Let's not confuse these things. Just because it's not useful to me as an advanced lifter doesn't mean it's not phenomenal for the novice. And still a big chunk of you out there listening are novices still. The majority are, no matter what. All right, next question. Can a beginner get all his noob gains with 3 sets of 20 light reps instead of 5 heavy reps? What's the highest amount of reps you can go and still get the same amount of gains as a traditional 5 rep max? I'm going to say 10. I'm going to say 10. Maybe 12, but 12's pushing it. Let's come back over to this stuff on these high rep sets. You have to understand that this really high rep set data is extremely controversial, and there are alternative explanations and alternative data to it. Okay, it is not set in stone that it produces equal hypertrophy to more moderate reps. That has not been proven. What has been shown is metabolites. Okay, metabolites produces similar metabolites in your bloodstream. That's not the same as muscle growth. So when you look at a lot of this data on it, and I think Lyle McDonald did a very, very phenomenal breakdown of some of the data looking at some of the really high volume, high rep training for hypertrophy, is that sometimes when you're studying it, it can be difficult to distinguish between inflammation and water retention versus hypertrophy in the short term. And he's actually looked at some of the data and broken down and shown that there's actually reason to believe that people who do these phases of some of this form of training, that it's intramuscular water, transient storage factors, and inflammation that's causing the so-called muscle growth, or a large chunk of it. And that when the studies have looked at it and the people detrain from it and they don't go to the gym for 10 days, they lose all of it. So a lot of this muscle growth that guys are getting from it, at least in some studies, have suggested that it only lasts for about 10 days. Okay, it's not real growth. It's not tissue growth. It's just swelling. Potentially. I'm not saying that's an absolute fact. So when you look at it from that perspective, it may not be as useful as we think it is. Not saying there isn't some muscle growth there. And I'm not saying doing some of this high volume training doesn't set the stage for further muscle growth. All right, because I do a lot of high rep stuff for certain muscles, but I have some of my clients do some stuff like that. But it's oftentimes a case of we're just training our body to allocate resources to an area. If we have an area that's really lagging, like your upper back or rear delts or whatever, and we do a bunch of 20 rep sets of face pulls and stuff, it's going to happen. You're going to get that temporary swelling. There'll be some hypertrophy. There'll be temporary swelling. It's training your body to allocate resources to that area to get used to holding more weight there. It might set the stage for further muscle growth. It'll increase work capacity. But you're not going to maximize muscle growth, I don't believe, as a novice off 20 rep sets. It's just not going to happen. 5 to 10. Okay? And be realistic here. Your first year in the gym, 5 to 10 rep sets. That's going to be your winning ticket. That's where you're going to put your real size on. You need to focus upon progressive overload and sufficient training volume in that 5 to 10 rep range. That's what's going to build your foundation. Hey, as a novice lifter, it's very hard to build your foundation off of lower reps than 5. Very difficult for a lot of reasons with neuromuscular efficiency and training volumes and recovery. And you start going above 10, we run into the same problems. You run into a lot of junk volume and possible swelling and stuff that's not really efficient muscle growth. So no, stick to the 5 to 10. Why deviate from what we know for a fact works to do silly, goofy crap? All right, it doesn't make any sense. It makes you unintelligent. It doesn't make you smart. Think that through. All right, next question. For the conventional deadlift, would you recommend all novice lifters do 1 set of 5 as written or 5 singles? Well, that's a good question. I could lean in the direction of saying the 5 singles would be fine. I don't think it matters so much for the novice lifter, to be fair. Even though I tell guys the singles are probably better, I think for the novice lifter, it probably isn't going to make enough of a difference to really and truly matter. How's that for an answer? How about if a novice lifter literally wants to take 30 to 60 seconds between each rep on the deadlift to get it set up perfect again? Would that still be their 5 rep set? Yeah, I think it would. I'd still count it. You know what? How about we go over to the point of for the novice lifter, instead of changing the rule and saying either or, we just say to the novice lifter, you take as long as you need to get perfectly set back up between every single rep on your peak 5 rep set for your deadlift. How's that? Whether that's 5 seconds, if it's less than 3, there's a problem. If it's 5 seconds or if it's a minute, you just do whatever you have to do to make all 5 reps perfect and reset up perfectly. There we go. And we'll count it as a 5 rep set either way, whether it ends up being 5 singles or not. I think that's the best solution. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what is the best method to bring a 415 to 420 deadlift to 500? And you're coming back to my coaching experience here, brother, rather than my personal experience. I couldn't tell you. I've never had a deadlift that low. Right? That throws people off. First time I tried to deadlift, I pulled 455. I didn't do anything special to get to 525. I got to 525 on a deadlift without using any gear and without knowing how to program. I just walked in and deadlifted heavy once or twice a week. Right? That was all I did. I don't even remember what my rep schemes looked like. I just pulled heavy. So, over to the point, dealing with clients, people I've known, people I've worked with, things I've observed. A lot of people genetically can't get to a 500 deadlift off of just straight linear progression. Because normally I would say, I don't know, run one of my novice programs and run an intermediate program would be at 500. Not true for a lot of people. Here's what I'm going to say. For everybody else, you wouldn't be asking if you had the genetics to get to a 500 deadlift easy. So you're stuck in the low 400s range, and that's what you're pulling. You've been training a little while, I know, because you posted stuff over at least the last year. I know this name. You need to find your weak links and build everything up. The deadlift is one of those lifts that can be built off of other exercises, because a conventional deadlift itself is hard to recover from. It's a beast. You need to figure out where you're weakest and build those areas up, right? You probably need to do some deficit work to get more explosive off the floor. You need to start looking at where you feel the deadlift failing. When you pull a heavy single, where does it hurt? You know what's giving out. You know if your back is giving out. You know if your hamstrings are throbbing at the end of a heavy single or heavy set. What's lit up? If it's your hamstrings, you need more glute ham raises. You need more hamstring work. If it's your mid back, you need to be doing good mornings. Or even more rows. If it's your upper back, you need to be doing rows. Where are you feeling the exercise fail when you start getting heavy? Or you get a fatiguing multi-rep set? Wherever that area is, you need to come in and train the heck out of it. You need to train it, and train it hard. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to do supplemental lifts for all those areas. Mid-back, upper back, core, hamstrings. But wherever you're weakest, you need to be doing a lot of training volume for. And that'll get you to the 500 usually. If you don't have the genetic gifts to just get to a 500 easily. You're going to have to do some hypertrophy for your lagging areas. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.